Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the witnesses who are here today. The kind of stories that we're discussing today are horrific. And when it comes to crimes of violence, we face far too many crimes of violence in all 50 states. Like many members of this committee, I have spent a lot of years working in law enforcement, working to punish, working to incarcerate violent criminals, and working to deter violent crime before it occurs. If the objective is to stop violent crime, what is effective is targeting actual violent criminals. Unfortunately, the pattern we've seen from our Democratic colleagues is that inevitably when a shooting occurs, such as the horrific, bigoted, racist shooting in Buffalo, which all of us are horrified by, Democrats can't help but follow then White House Chief of Staff Rahm Emanuel's adage of never let a good crisis go to waste. And they immediately do what Chuck Schumer has done, what the chairman just did, saying the cause of this horrific and racist mass murder is wonderfully and conveniently the opposing political party. That's cynical, it's dishonest, and it's wrong. And in this instance, the facts of this particular deranged shooter don't even fit the story they're trying to tell. Yes, he was a racist and a bigot and an anti-Semite, all of which are repulsive. But he was also a leftist. He was also an environmental extremist who talked about that if we don't stop consumption in this world, that humanity is going to die off. And yet somehow I don't see my Democratic colleagues saying their intemperate advocacy of the Green New Deal caused this psychopath to murder people. He's also someone who has condemned conservatism and capitalism. He hates capitalism. He's a leftist. And yet I don't see my Democratic colleagues saying, well, all the socialists in the Democratic Party are the cause of this lunatic, racist mass murderer. If the objective is to stop violent crime, and that should be the objective, we should focus on policies that work. Consistently, the policies that work are policies that target violent criminals. Now, 10 years ago, I introduced legislation, the Cruz legislation, designed to go after felons and fugitives and those with serious mental illness when they lie and try to illegally buy a gun, to prosecute them and put them in jail, to ensure that our databases are complete. In Texas, we've seen far too many of these mass shootings, including the horrific crime in Sutherland Springs. I was there at that beautiful church the day after that shooting. In that instance, that mass murderer should have been in jail. But the Obama administration failed to report his felony conviction in the Air Force to the database. So when he went to purchase his firearm, the background check came up clean. Had Cruz passed into law, it mandated the Department of Justice conduct an audit of federal crimes to make sure those convictions are in the database. Presumably that audit would have caught that felony conviction. Not only that, Cruz also created a gun crime task force to prosecute felons who try to illegally buy firearms, which means that deranged mass murderer would have been in prison, incarcerated, instead of in that beautiful church murdering those innocent people. We had a vote on the Senate floor on Cruz. It got a majority of senators voted for it. 52 senators voted for it. That was in the Harry Reid Democrat Senate, a majority Democrat Senate. Now you might think, okay, a bipartisan majority, surely this passed. Well, no. Turns out Senate Democrats filibustered Cruz. They demanded 60 votes. And my Democratic colleagues who are here today all voted for the filibuster to stop Cruz from going into effect. Why was that deranged shooter not in jail? because the approach of today's Senate Democrats is to try to go after the firearms of law-abiding citizens instead of targeting the violent criminals that are the real threat. Now, domestic violence is a horrific scourge. Far too many women, children, and even some men are victims of domestic violence. But yet, when it comes to firearms, yes, are used by violent criminals, but they are also used over and over and over again by victims of violent crimes to defend themselves. If any of us could pass a law to end domestic violence in America, we would happily and enthusiastically do so. I have, over the course of the past 2 decades, dealt with far too many families who have lost loved ones to violent crime, to homicide. It is horrific, it is evil. But disarming people in situations where they themselves are potentially at risk risks increasing the chances of violence. If you have an individual that may be a victim of domestic violence, preventing that individual from defending herself or himself is a uniquely bad idea. Chairman referenced that the states adopt laws to address these issues, and I think that is the right approach. Unsurprisingly, the people of the state of Texas make different decisions about how to handle these issues than perhaps the people of Connecticut or California or New York. That's how our constitutional system was meant to operate. And so, I wish we had a hearing focused on how to stop violent crime. I wish we had a hearing focused on the skyrocketing murder rates in this country that we're seeing right now. I wish we had a hearing focused on the skyrocketing carjacking rates that we're seeing in this country right now. I wish we had a hearing focused on the policies advocated by congressional Democrats of abolishing the police and defunding the police that caused the crime to skyrocket. I wish we had a hearing on Soros DAs that were elected with millions of dollars from Democratic donors who get into office and refuse to prosecute violent criminals, release violent criminals onto the street, and then allow those violent criminals to commit yet more murders. That would be a hearing with some urgency. That would be a hearing where we are seeing people being killed over and over and over again, but that hearing does not fit the political agenda of my Democratic colleagues. Thank you.
We're going to hear from Senator Wyden. There are rebuttals to what you just heard, but in the interest of time, I'm going to move to my colleague from Oregon, Senator Wyden.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Chairman, let me just note that for years,